A few weeks ago, I was talking with some friends, and they gave me a picture, a metaphor for what the world looks like. According to this metaphor, the world was a very dark place, like all the lights were out, and out of the world there were like these screams rising up from people. Now, if you looked up a little bit higher, you could see the sky, and the sky had a sun in it, except the sun was covered by clouds. And this was their idea of what the world looked like. I think the interpretation of this is something like the world is representing the world, and the screams are people dying, people suffering, people not being content with how the world is. I guess painting the world as a horrible place. And then I think the sun was supposed to represent light or God's truth, and that you could see it, but oftentimes people would block it. And so there's this picture, and it kind of relates to a lot of things that I've heard people say about the world. People have said that Christians need to bring hope to a lost and dying world. And I've never really understood that. Like, you can parrot it back and you can say the world is a horrible place. But from my own experience, because I haven't experienced much of the world, I have a hard time seeing it as such a hopeless place. So today my question is, what is the world like? But because I'm asking the question, I'm going to end up having to answer it something more like, what does the world look like to me? And then I want to figure out if I'm thinking about it in the right way, and to explain about how I think we should be viewing the world. Now, the way that I view the world, I think has to start with the way that I view people, and the way that I view suffering. I think that suffering is part of the way the world is. And I don't think that making you a Christian will in any way make you suffer less. But I've seen, or the way that I see it is that whenever there's pain, whenever there is tribulation or problems, there's always joy and there's always hope that's mixed in somewhere there. I don't know exactly how to explain it. Part of it is the fact that suffering brings you closer to God, and that weakness shows God's power better. Part of it is that it humbles you. Part of it is that it helps you trust God. I don't think you can come up with an explanation to completely justify the presence of suffering, except perhaps to say that there's sin in the world, and so the world isn't as it should be. And so I've seen Christians, I've seen myself experience being depressed or not being happy with the way the world is and being in pain. And so I don't think that by becoming a Christian we're somehow going to rescue a horrible world into a world that is perfect. I do think that being a Christian gives you the right perspective and helps you understand suffering and helps you survive suffering because God is more and because God redeems it all. But yeah, I think suffering has a purpose. So that's one thing. That perhaps I often see suffering just through Christian mindset, and I don't always sympathize with the way that other people are. Maybe that's why I have a hard time seeing the world as lost and dying. Also, the way that I see people. I think of people, well, the people that I've met who aren't Christians, like just normal people in college classes or, I don't know, in the neighborhood, whatever, they seem to be pretty normal. And they seem to be capable of having real happiness. Maybe not joy, but they're not all emo people. And so, by the same token, I don't see them automatically as being lost or dying. I just see them as normal people who maybe don't really think about spiritual things. And so, what I think is that maybe the world, like the world of people in general who don't have hope, maybe it is hopeless, and maybe it is full of darkness, but I think a lot of that darkness is spiritual darkness, and maybe we make the mistake of stereotyping people. In my mind, it makes the most sense that when you're talking about what the world looks like, you have to start with the people in it. And so I don't think that any of my naivete, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I don't think any of that naiveness of mine is necessarily bad. I just think that as I grow older, I'm going to come to understand the world better and understand human nature better. And hopefully, I'll come to see people with a fuller perspective. And I think once you see people rightly, and once you understand that they still need hope and they still need salvation, even though they might not be depressed all the time, I think once you see those people rightly, then we can have a better picture of what the world actually looks like.